A key message of Egypt's incoming presidency is that this conference is a defining moment for Egypt and of Africa's leadership role in the fight against climate change. Many of the distinguished speakers earlier today highlighted that the contribution of the African continent to the overall emissions is more or less negligible. And on the other hand, the impacts that we face as a continent are absolutely devastating. It's through this realization that we must demonstrate a will and a commitment to tackle climate change and to achieve a just and sustainable future for the people of Africa, as well as the wider global population.
Policy conversations are extremely important because when you look at the context within which we are operating in, it is indeed important to harmonize position, to harmonize viewpoints, and also to build both South-North solidarity with positions that are developed within African context. Therefore, conversation of this nature are useful in terms of, number one, being able to begin to look at what are the emerging narratives and position in regard to climate change within African context, and then beginning to see how those positions are nesting within UNFCCC processes, and what then would be a priority for a continent like Africa within UNFCCC process.
So I think these conversations where you bring together multiple stakeholders from across the ecosystem, there are ministers and government representatives, there's the donor community, there's the international diplomacy community, there's civil society, there are students and youth activists. That kind of multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder conversation is really important so that we can drive now towards but how in action do we actually center green jobs in this big, broad climate agenda that can sometimes seem so far away for many of us. So for me, that's why these conversations are important, and it's important to keep having them so that we incrementally make progress.
Agricultural systems and forest conservation are not mutually exclusive. They must work hand in hand in a win-win setup. This will help addressing several issues at the same time, such as increasing the food production, reducing the foodstuff prices, addressing deforestation issue, addressing the climate issues, protecting peace, democracy, and security. Land degradation as well as forest degradation are a major threat to democracy, peace, and security because they're creating some socioeconomic problems that will create some uprising and dissatisfaction amongst the people. To achieve this, we need some major investments.
The jobs created in the renewable energy space are a lot when you're talking during construction phase. So they're created in the thousands. What is often underreported is what happens when these energy plants start operating. Renewable energy by virtue is a high-tech sector, meaning that it is not very labor dependent. So the jobs reduce. And what we need to be asking ourselves as Africans is, how are we going to have this just energy transition not result in massive job losses? If you look at a country like South Africa, above 60,000 jobs are created in the coal industry. Another 50,000 of those jobs are created by Eskom, which is predominantly powered by traditional energy sources such as gas and coal. It's very important we start to ask ourselves, how are we going to plug the gap? And that is dependent largely on what our policy and decision makers in the political space actually do about what they are promising to do.
The reason why such conversations are important is particularly when we talk of just transition, we're saying the transition of general economics to a greener economy. So in this case, which means then the creation of green jobs, which are decent jobs then that contribute positively, number one, to the environment, positively contributing to addressing issues of climate change and also issues to do with the economical as well as social benefits. Therefore, such a conversation, when we bring in just transition, it's also important then to ensure that there is effective social dialogue, which means that the involvement of various stakeholders who would want to be contributing to issues of climate change, be it coming in from the government departments, be bit also coming in from the private sector employers' perspective, and largely, of course, leaving no one behind from the workers themselves. So it's also important then that such engagement, such dialogue happens from the government, the employers reflecting the private sector, as well as also even the employers coming in from both the private sector and the public sector, then of course the workers themselves. So if we are saying just transition, which means that it has to be fair, it has to be inclusive, then it doesn't have to leave no one behind.
To really mobilize, and I think the COP27 should be the COP of action and the COP of mobilizing resources. Otherwise, we in Africa will stop participating in the COPs because it's very expensive for our countries, and we go stay in the hotels, very expensive hotels, and at the end of the day we come back with nothing. So we need to change that narrative. This is the time. Our children are suffering, our community is suffering, so we need to really change, and we need to be bold, in terms of saying that we should have climate justice. This is the way. We cannot even negotiate. We have to have climate justice, and to ensure that Africa's special needs are prioritized. This will help us move towards the climate resilient continent and to contribute to the attainment of the aspiration of Agenda 2063 and the Sustainable Development Goal, Agenda 2030.